Vladimir Putin's war effort is estimated to be losing up to a staggering $100 million a day following sustained Ukrainian drone strikes on the country's critical oil infrastructure. A wave of damaging attacks on key transport routes has slashed Russia's oil shipments by around 880,000 barrels a day, according to Ukraine's armed forces.
Well, it's Ukraine's goal to do everything that it can to inhibit Russia's military capacity. And what it's done is it has cut fairly severely into Russia's earnings, even during this incredible spike in the cost of oil and the price of oil as a result of the war in Iran. And so it was estimated last month that Russia made twice as much as it normally makes in energy revenues. It was $19 billion last month, as opposed to around $9 billion in the month before. So as Ukraine continues to attack Russian energy infrastructure, Russia will make more money in the coming month and in the coming months than it has previously. But what Ukraine is doing is preventing Russia from making even more money that it would be able to apply to the war effort. So Russia's not making as much money as it otherwise could. Ukrainian damage to Russia's energy infrastructure is preventing Russia from capitalizing even more on the rise in oil prices. I mean, don't forget that Russia's still operating under energy sanctions. But what the rising price of oil has done, including now an extension of sanctions relief from the US government for energy that's already at sea from Russia. What the increase in the price of oil has done is it's eliminated the discount that Russian oil was previously sold at. Prior to the war in Iran, Russian oil was selling at far below market prices. But now that market prices are very, very high, the price of Russian oil as well has surged. But Russia's just not able to export as much energy as it used to be able to export because of the damage that Ukraine has done to its energy infrastructure. So Putin doesn't appear to be very, very worried about the war right now. In fact, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said that Russia's not interested in peace talks at the moment and isn't really putting any energy into that sort of effort. What this changes for Russia is, there are several different things that Russia could do with this extra money. And that is, it could put it into the National Sovereign Wealth Fund, Russia's sort of rainy day fund for topping up budget revenues when it needs it. It could also use this money to spend on weapons. It could use extra money to pay more to recruits, to try to get people to sign up for the war in greater numbers. And so all of those options now are a little bit more constrained than they otherwise would be because of the damage to their energy infrastructure and because of their inability to produce and export as much oil as they might have without those Ukrainian attacks. Yeah, it's harder and harder for Russia to bounce back from this sort of damage. Of course, they'll do what they can to repair any damage to their ports, to pipelines, to refineries, to storage facilities. But that's harder under the conditions of economic pressure that they're under. Some of those repairs will require Western technology that's not available to them as a result of sanctions. And there's very little excess capacity left in, for example, Russian storage for energy. One of the things that Russia's concerned about is having perhaps in the future to shut down some of its wells and to reduce production. And that's a very, very tricky move because once you shut down an oil well, it can be very, very difficult to start it back up. So Russia will try to repair its damaged energy infrastructure, but its options are constrained as a result of the sanctions environment. The Ukrainian strategy has been very, very effective. And this combined with sanctions, when they're enforced, has actually caused significant damage to the Russian economy. And the more recent Ukrainian attacks on Russian energy infrastructure has actually damaged Russia's ability to earn. This is a time when, all other things being equal, Russia would be pulling in enormous sums of money. I mean, literally sort of billions of dollars a month in excess energy revenue. And Ukraine has really pulled that back quite a bit. And so really, the Ukrainian attacks on Russia are actually one of the most effective things that's happened since the outbreak of the war. I mean, if we're trying to punish Russia and prevent its ability to fund the war, sanctions have been acting, in a sort of slow and cumulative fashion. But these physical attacks on Russia's energy industry have an almost instant impact on what the country can do in its earnings. Well, I mean, I wouldn't say that he's not worried at all. I mean, I think that he is worried about Russia's lack of progress on the battlefield. Ukraine has really been pushing back much more strenuously lately. I think he's worried about keeping up with Ukrainian advances in drone technology, which is the source of some of Ukraine's most fierce resistance on the battlefield. I think to a certain extent, he's worried about the impact on Russia's domestic economy, although that's not his primary driver for making his decisions about prosecuting the war. I think that there's a collection of issues that are weighing quite heavily on Russia's military decision-making process. But the war is existential for President Putin, and he's now so far in to this military misadventure, and the military narrative is what's keeping the political drive afloat on all of this. And so there won't be, for quite some time, there won't be any single, or maybe not even a group of factors that will be strong enough to change President Putin's thinking or to change the course of the war. Russia is into this far too deeply to change course, and this means far too much to Putin for him to ever sort of pull back on the throttle. Well, I mean, there is a lot of Russian activity aside from military activity already happening all across Europe, including the Baltics. And Russia, of course, is very, very interested in maintaining a strong presence in the Arctic. I mean, I think that the financial pressures primarily right now have to do with the military campaign. And remember that Russia will make more money as a result of the spike in energy prices, just not as much as it otherwise might because of the damage. But I think that Russia's strategic aims, and that includes the Arctic, and that includes continuing to destabilize Europe, both militarily and politically and economically and in cyber combat and in energy combat and in all of the different hybrid and sort of gray zone aggression that Russia is throwing at Europe. I think all of that will continue largely uninterrupted.